Be ready to have your mind blown because I am officially all blinged out with my Running in Slippers copy. I'm actually really proud of myself. I wasn't sure how this was going to turn out or if I would even finish because I was discouraged at some points. I did have to buy some new supplies because I made some rookie mistakes. I wasn't sure how the sizing of the gemstones worked and any of that, but I figured it out and I'm really excited with how it turned out. I actually might make some more and sell them. I'm not sure yet. We'll see how adventurous I get. But welcome to, I think this is video 8. I lost count, but we are moving to Hawaii today. Obviously, not literally because I already live here, but I don't even know what chapter we're on. Let me check my notes. We are on chapter 13, and this is where I mentioned in the last video, shit started getting real, meaning up until this point, I was acting as if, and there was like a part of me where it still felt like a fantasy. It didn't feel like it was real, but this is where it started to get real because I had the money to move because I manifested it and made it all work out. I boldly and courageously, because I was working in corporate America at the time, I asked my manager if I could work remotely in Hawaii. He said yes. I boldly and courageously reached out to a realtor to figure out the market value of my condo and when was a good time to sell and all of that. And the market value had gone up substantially. It was a great time to sell. And so the ball truly started moving. So the first major thing that happened was, well, first I sold my condo. And I wanted to say, because I didn't go into this in the book, but when I bought that condo, because I had been living in the South Loop of Chicago for 7 years, and my heart was really in that neighborhood because when I moved to the South Loop in 2007, it was still in the very early stages of gentrifying. And because it used to be old housing projects and it started to gentrify. And when I moved into the neighborhood, it was a ghost town. There were a few new developments. I was renting a condo from the owner, and my building was only 50% occupied, and a lot of the other buildings were not 100% occupied. There was like one restaurant, there were no storefronts. It was a ghost town. And when I would tell people that I lived in the South Loop, they would like look at me like I was crazy because I was like in my 20s and they were like, what is a young white girl doing in the South Loop? But I loved that neighborhood. One, because it was so quiet and nobody was there. Two, because it was close to the lake and it was actually really affordable for being quiet and close to the lake. So I personally loved the South Loop. My heart had become attached to it. But in that time, it had become very overpopulated. The prices has gone up. And for the price, the value just wasn't there because compared to other neighborhoods in the city, there were nicer places to live. And I remember I wasn't finding places that to buy. And this is when I bought in 2013, 2014. I wasn't finding anything in the South Loop that I liked. And my realtor at the time was like, well, are you open to other neighborhoods? I can try to find things in other neighborhoods. And I agreed because I was a people pleaser and I didn't want to sound closed minded. So the only reason I agreed is because I didn't want to sound closed minded. But the very first place we looked at was this condo in Old Town. And I immediately fell in love with it. Had all the things that I wanted. And the number one thing that I loved about it, it had an unobstructed view of the Chicago skyline, which is so beautiful. I am a nature girl, but I also just love cityscapes and skylines. And I think Chicago has one of the most beautiful skylines in the entire world. I'm kind of biased, I get it. But anyway, I immediately fell in love, and that's the condo I ended up buying. Well, it was only on the market for 2 days when I bought it. And I remember feeling really good about that because Old Town, it's always been a pretty hot neighborhood. And I was like, actually, I think I like the fact that I'm living in this neighborhood instead of South Loop in terms of a buying and selling of real estate perspective, because I knew one day when I sold that it would also sell pretty fast. So my point about all of that, when I sold my condo, it sold in 2 days, which I wasn't totally surprised, and so that happened pretty fast. Luckily, the couple that bought the condo, they were buying it for their son. They really weren't in a hurry for him to move in. I wasn't really in a hurry to move out because I think it sold in well, they put in the offer, like, in August, and I didn't move until November. But it was fine, like, the timing wasn't a big deal with them or me. So, I guess that's the point I wanted to say about so selling my condo was the first thing, but, with real estate negotiations and stuff, like, there probably would have been opportunities for me to pull out. So my whole point in this is that was the first, like, real big step to take to actually making the move to Hawaii because it's like, okay, shit's really starting to get real because contracts are being signed, like negotiations are happening, like it's happening. And then the other big thing that happened was shipping my car. And that may not seem like a big deal, but my car, and I still have this car to this day, it means so much to me because of what it represents. Because when I was a little girl, I had a red Barbie Ferrari convertible. So ever since I was a little girl, I always wanted to have a red convertible. And my parents always hated on the idea because they were like, convertibles are dangerous, the insurance costs too much, red cars get more speeding tickets, all of those things. Even when I finally bought the car in 2016, I would have friends who would make similar comments like, well, because I lived in Chicago. So they're like, oh, why would you get a convertible in Chicago? Because you can only have the top down for a few months. I feel like nobody ever really supported the idea, but it just made the little girl in me so happy. Also, I was really excited because it's a Volkswagen EOS and they stopped mass producing them in 2015, but in 2016 and I think even 2017, mine's a 2016, they did limited production runs. So that's the car I really wanted because if you don't know anything about the EOS, because again, they don't make them anymore, but I think to this day, it's the only convertible that also has a sunroof. It's the only hardtop convertible that also has a sunroof because Volkswagen patented the design. So I thought it was so cool that it was like one of its kind. It also had a sunroof, and like that was the car I wanted. So I it just represented a dream to me. Like, I was always told this was something that was unrealistic and I shouldn't do, and I did it for myself, and it made my inner child so happy. Also, it was completely paid off, so I was a little nervous about it getting damaged or whatever. Because if it got totaled or whatever, they didn't make them anymore, so I couldn't get another one unless I got a used one. So I was really nervous about shipping my car because I had to ship it by truck to Long Beach and then by boat from Long Beach. And and then also I had to coordinate all the logistics because the trucking company was like, it could take up to 2 weeks. The boat company was like, it could take up to 2 weeks. And luckily, Chicago's a place that you can survive without a car. So I shipped my car about a month in advance because according to the logistics estimates that both companies gave me, it could potentially take that long. Also, I can at least go without a car in Chicago. So I was like, even if that's too long, I'd rather go without a car in Chicago than in Hawaii. So I shipped my car about a month in advance. And that's when I felt like shit really started getting real because I was like, oh my God, I don't have a car. And I want to look at my notes. Oh, the thing about shipping my car, this is kind of a behind the scenes thing because it kind of sucks. It sucked that I did ship my car when I did because I feel like there were like certain opportunities that came up and then I couldn't do them because I didn't have a car. So here is one of them. I don't know if you guys know who the Fitness Marshal is. He has a YouTube channel. I highly recommend checking him out, but he does dance videos. And when I lived in Chicago, he would put out, I don't know how he does it now, but he would put out a new video every week. And so I would always learn his dances. Well, He did a live tour, and one of his stops was in Chicago. And like the week before I shipped my car, I went to his live tour. And I went by myself because none of my friends knew who he was, and they weren't even really interested in going. So I felt like it was preparing me for the move because it's like I'm going to have to do things by myself and meet friends and whatever. So I went to this Fitness Marshall live event, which was so amazing. It was one of the coolest things I've ever done because it was just a whole room full of people dancing. Also, it was like kind of a small event, so it felt kind of intimate. But anyway, I met these 2 girls there and we had so much fun. And the one girl was a dance instructor and she was like, "Oh, you should come to my classes." But they were in the suburbs. And I was like, "Oh, but I'm moving to Hawaii and shipping my car next week." So I couldn't go to her classes. But it was just like kind of cool the opportunities that I had in my remaining days in Chicago. Because one of the downsides to Hawaii is that there aren't really things like that. So I will say that about Chicago. There was like always events and like if comedians or people like Fitness Marshall, who I think he's a lot more popular now, but even now if he did a tour, like he would probably only stop in the bigger cities. So that was the cool thing about Chicago, like we had a lot of opportunity and that event was really cool and I did make new friends, but I couldn't go visit them because I didn't have a car for my last month in Chicago, which again, like wasn't a huge deal, but it was kind of nerve-wracking because it was like that was my baby. But the day I shipped my car, it was very reassuring because the truck driver came and picked it up and he was super familiar with shipping cars to Hawaii and he's like, "Oh yeah, I know the guys at the Matson dock. They always smile and wave to me." So that at least reassured me that he knew exactly what to do. But it was funny because my car got there by truck, I think within 3 or 4 days, and then it was sitting at the Matson lot for like a week or 2 because it wasn't scheduled to ship for a few more weeks. And then it got to Hawaii like within a week. So and my car got to Hawaii before I did. So that was reassuring when I got all the confirmations that it was there. And then let me look at my notes. So I sold my condo. Oh, here's another thing that happened in my remaining time in Chicago. So I didn't go into a lot of detail about Mike, who I met at the Tony Robbins event. After the event, we did have dinner. And at the dinner, for me, it was more of like a romantic sexual attraction. And so after I got home, our texts were kind of like I don't even know what I'm talking about. They were flirty, flirtatious, and but I was getting ready to move and I'm like, I don't really want that energy going into my move. But we were talking one day and he was like, "Yeah, I really want to write a book, but I'm not a writer." And he knew that I was because I had courageously and boldly stated that as one of my intentions at this Tony Robbins event. So he was like, "Would you be interested in writing this book for me?" And me then saw that as a huge opportunity because I was getting ready to let go of him in this flirty, romantic way. But I'm like, "Ooh, now we could be business partners." And I loved the idea of writing a book for him. Even though I had the idea for my book, I loved the idea of writing a book for him because then I could hide behind someone else because I was terrified of allowing myself to be seen and the things that I wanted to write about were too vulnerable, too scary, blah, 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 blah. So I had all these limiting beliefs about my idea. So I was like, this is my perfect out for my idea. And then I could hide behind him. So going into this move, I was like, I'm doing it. I'm going to move to Hawaii and be a writer. And I'm planting the seed now because this comes up later, but I really wanted to just be clear on how excited or how exciting it was for me to hide behind someone else. So I'm like, this is my opportunity to write a book and I don't have to be seen. I'm going to write a book for him. So that was kind of exciting moving into Hawaii. turns into a whole thing, which we're gonna get into in later chapters. So I shipped my car. I had already sold my condo in 2 days, so it was just a matter of me moving out and actually going through with the sale. Mike had asked me to write the book with him, so I was all excited about that. And then something else, this is a behind the scenes moment. So I think this happened within like the 2 months prior to me moving, because I moved on November 2nd. Yeah, because I think it happened in like September. At the beginning of the year, there was a huge management shakeup in my company, meaning some senior executives were let go because a few years before we got a new CEO and he was slowly starting to reorganize in a way that he wanted to. And he let go, I worked in IT, he let go of our CIO, which is basically the CEO of IT. And I reported directly to him. I was part of the whole system that he set up. And people were starting to get reorganized and let go. And so I had a really harsh moment because for a while the changes were neutral. They did not affect me. I could see that they were happening, but I was trying not to make any unnecessary meaning out of them. And in hindsight, it was the perfect timing when I asked my manager when I could move, because I asked him in May. If I would have waited even like 2 or 3 more months, that's when things started changing even more, and I don't even think he would have had the authority to give me that answer. But when I asked him, he was in full authority to give me that answer, and he said yes, so the wheels were already in motion. But like a month or 2 before I moved, I really started feeling like this oh shit feeling, because I really started to see that my role could be in danger of being eliminated solely for the reason that I was just part of this old management structure and he was trying to bring in fresh new people and freshen things up. And I was like, oh, this is not good for me and my role. And again, this is 2018. So remote work was not a trendy thing. There were remote jobs available because I had kind of looked into it, but they weren't widely available. Also, local jobs in Hawaii aren't widely available, and they also don't pay as well as my Chicago job. So a few months before I moved, I kind of had this oh shit moment, like, is this a good time? And the reason I bring this up, one, just for like a behind the scenes fact, but the other reason I bring this up is because this is why it is so important to be connected to your intuition and who you are and what your path is. Because if, and I didn't ask anyone else outside of me, but if I would have asked anyone else for their opinion, anyone else would have been like, this is not a good time for you to move. Like, if you lose your job, you're screwed. Like, just don't do this. It's not a good idea. And logically, I felt the same way. But in my soul, I was like, this is my path. I'm meant to move to Hawaii. I just, and even though, like, yeah, I wanted it really bad, it was more than that. It was like I could just feel it in my soul that it was something that I was meant to do, which was another reason, because this whole process was very scary. Like I've pointed out, very scary, like scary as in like out of my comfort zone in uncertain situations where I was like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this, but I'm going to do it because I felt so strongly in my soul that it was just what I was meant to do. So, this is why it is so important to connect to your intuition and your soul and your higher self and whatever you believe in. And whatever you believe in, because this is supported, what I'm saying is supported by both science and woo woo. But your soul and your intuition and your higher self does not lie. And every time I felt the fear, every time I felt the doubt, I would recalibrate with the feeling. Even though it seemed like crazy, I just felt like I was on the right path. And this is why it's always so important to calm the noise and listen to your intuition, because it doesn't always sound logical. As a matter of fact, most of the time, it doesn't sound logical at all. It sounds crazy. It's like, oh my God, what am I doing? No sane person would do this. but your intuition always knows what's up. And I tell you that from experience because I used to largely ignore it. And moving to Hawaii was one of the first major things I did to follow my intuition, and it didn't lead me astray. So I cannot stress that enough because this whole work thing, that was one thing that really made me want to chicken out because I think that really started to unravel before I even shipped my car. I think I had signed the contract on my condo. Again, there was probably a loophole that I could get out of it, but I really had this moment of there's still time to back out. Maybe I should back out. But my soul, like, I don't even know how to describe it. It was just like this feeling like, just do it. You will figure it out. And that's another thing I want to stress is just having a self trust that's so fierce that you know that you can figure it out. Because I'm not going to lie to you guys, because as you will see, my life did not get better when I moved to Hawaii. It actually got a little bit worse before it got better. Shit happens in life, whether you're happy, sad, whatever. But what matters is your ability to trust yourself to figure it out and have that resilience. Because the truth is, we are all very smart, intelligent people. And I'm not just talking book smarts, by the school system and getting grades. We're all very intelligent in our own way. Trust me, like, you can figure shit out. You've done it before, you'll be able to do it in the future. So for me, just first of all, having the intuition that this is the right thing to do, even though it feels really effing crazy. And also in my mind, because it was a possibility that I could move to Hawaii and get let go from my job. And in my mind, I was like, first of all, I'm not going to worry about it until it happens. Like, yes, it's a possibility and I need to be aware of that. I'm not going to unnecessarily worry about it until it happens. And if it does happen, I trust myself to figure it out. And I had that fierce self trust. And that takes a lot of inner work. And I am still working on my self trust. But I just want to point out the main story about what was going on with my job is about how important it is to connect with your intuition and have that fierce self trust because you are capable and you can do hard stuff. And I already know that about you, whoever you are. So luckily, I was able to have that belief in me and push through the situation with my job and move anyway. And I will say so when I felt like shit really got real is when the movers came to pick up my stuff, which happened less than a week before my actual move because there was a period of time where all of my major belongings were in logistics that were completely out of my control. And you guys, I that's like a level of trust and release that I don't think to this day I've ever had to practice before because ultimately they were all material possessions, right? They could all be replaced, whatever. But it was a big leap of faith to have trust between my car and my furniture and the other bigger things that I shipped. It was just like putting it into the trust of everything's going to be okay. And ultimately it was, but that was like a big moment where I was like, this is really getting real. And so then I remember the day I moved, which was November 2nd, 2018. And I slept on a sleeping bag in my condo, and I had all of my stuff that I would take with me. I lived in a fully furnished monthly rental for the first month, and I'll get into that in future chapters. But I had 3 huge oversized suitcases that I bought at TJ Maxx. Like, they were gigantic. I don't even know. Other than moving, I have no idea why people would be buying suitcases this big because they're not meant for vacation. But I had 3 oversized suitcases. I slept in a sleeping bag the night before in my own condo. And I woke up for my flight and it was still dark. It was freezing cold. And I stepped out onto my balcony and I was just looking at the Chicago skyline because one of the cool things about Chicago, it's like a big bustling city, but at certain times, like for instance, it was probably like 5 a.m. in the morning. At certain times in the morning, it's just like so calm and peaceful. And I was looking at the skyline And it was, again, like I could just feel it in my soul, even though I was terrified. I felt like it was the right thing to do. And also, I knew things were gonna be uncertain for a while until I found a stable place to live and I got settled in and everything. I knew things were gonna be uncertain. I knew it wasn't going to be an easy transition with the culture and everything else. But again, I just had that deep self-trust that I could handle it. And I remember staring out into the skyline, feeling so much uncertainty, yet so much internal certainty because I was like, I can do this. And there was also just a huge sense of pride that I was doing it because, again, ever since I was a little girl, I had always wanted to have a red convertible and move to Hawaii. And I was like, here I am doing it. And again, I consider myself confident and courageous now. That is not who I was in 2018. So even reflecting on this moment, I'm like, man, I was such a badass that I did all of this. And so anyway, my friend Joe took me to the airport. And here's the thing about that, because I had these 3 oversized suitcases. So he helped me like load them into his car. He drove me to the airport. He even helped me as much as he could because like the drop-off situation at O'Hare is like you can't just park there, right? So he helped me as much as that he could, but then and then he left, but he helped me to the baggage situation at United Airlines, and then they checked me all in, and it cost $700 for all my oversized suitcases, which for moving, honestly, is not that big of a deal. And that was the other thing. I felt like such a boss that like I just swiped my credit card. And I'm like, I don't give a shit because I'm moving to Hawaii. But before Joe and I parted ways, I started to have a mild panic attack because it's like, you're helping me now. What the F am I going to do when I get to Honolulu? Because there's no one to help me with these 3 suitcases. And I remember he just told me, he was like, just don't worry about it until you get there. You'll figure it out. And that's like makes me want to cry. Joe is like my big brother. Hold on, I need a minute. Okay, I'll get through the rest of the story and then I'm gonna be done for the day. And I'll explain the reason why I got choked up. Not that I need to explain why I'm crying, but anyway, Joe was like my big brother. He still is in some ways, but he in that moment, he had more faith in me than I had in myself. And this is why it's so important to have that fierce self-trust because he knew I could handle it. I wasn't so sure of it yet, but because he was and still is my wise older brother, family of choice, I was like, he's right. I'm just not even going to think about it until I land. And I landed in Hawaii and I was so scared because like this is the beginning of my new life. I had no idea what that new life looked like. So I was truly facing the unknown. But I remember, how the pilot makes the announcement about the local weather. He was like, yeah, it was like in the high 70s and sunny. And even just him saying that, I was like, it's November and it's in the high 70s. This is amazing. What was I so afraid of? And if you've ever been to any of the airports in Hawaii, they're all open air. So you get out of the gate and going to baggage claim, it's open air. There's a view of the mountains and I'm walking to baggage claim looking at the mountains and in that moment because you guys have listened to me talk about how worried I was about asking my manager if I could work remote from Hawaii, how worried I was about going to the Tony Robbins event, how worried I was about the money, how worried I was about everything. I had so much fear and anxiety every step of the way. And as I'm looking at the mountains, I was like, what was I so afraid of? This is so amazing. So, the point I want to make here is we catastrophize. A lot of times we catastrophize things in our brain and think about the worst case scenario and think about how scary and uncertain and all the negative things about it when Very few times have things played out that way in real life as they catastrophized in my head. So this was a perfect example. I had worried about so many things. I had so much anxiety about so many things. And then I landed and I was like, this is my new life. What was I so afraid of? This is amazing. So the lesson here is, yeah, it's okay to think about the worst case scenario because in any situation, there's a whole spectrum of possibilities. And to not consider the worst case scenario isn't realistic. But you don't have to keep focusing on that and only focus on that and think and let that prevent you from taking action. Because honestly, I would have moved probably 4 or 5 months earlier if I wouldn't have been so scared about every single step of the way. But anyway, so I get to baggage claim and I wrangle all 3 suitcases off the carousel, and you guys, I didn't even blink, what is it called? Bat an eye or think or worry or anything. I just wrangled all 3 suitcases and wheeled them straight out to the Uber pickup and got my ride and went on my way. So even just, like, the worry about my suitcases, and I cannot even describe to you, and I know this seems like a stupid moment to be talking about. I will never forget how proud of myself I was as I was wheeling my 3 suitcases all by myself. I was like, "I am such a badass." And I remember there were some people looking at me, and admittedly, they were most likely looking at me because I had 3 ridiculously sized suitcases, so they were probably like, "What is this girl doing?" But I just imagined that they were, like, just so enthralled by this badass wrangling 3 huge suitcases by herself. That's how proud of myself I was because I was like, "I did this. I can do anything." Like, proving to myself that I could wrangle 3 oversized, heavy like, 1 suitcase I think was like 100 pounds. That's where all my luggage fees came from because it wasn't necessarily a size, it was that they weighed so much, but I somehow I did it. I was wheeling all 3 at the same time, and I was like, "If I can do this, I can do anything." And this is why I have another video in my other series about celebrating yourself. This is why it's so important to recognize these moments because, again, it seems seemingly simple. Like I'm just wheeling 3 suitcases by myself, but I was doing it by myself. And that was something to be celebrated. And that was building on my self trust, which I definitely needed for later, which we'll get into that in later chapters of the book. But I was also recognizing what Joe had recognized in me that I didn't see myself, and it was just, like, such a beautiful thing, and I don't think I will ever forget the moment of wheeling those 3 suitcases by myself because it was just such an amazing moment, and then I got my Uber and rode to my rental, and I remember I had those 3 gigantic suitcases, but I unpacked everything immediately because I was like, "I'm living here for the next month, so I want to make it feel like home, so I'm just gonna get settled in immediately." So, that's where I'll leave it for today because then we get into the whole adventure of like, I knew it wasn't going to be an easy transition, but it was way harder than I expected. So that's what we'll get into in the next chapters. So, and I don't think I was going to do the spine. I don't know. We'll see. So I don't know if there's going to be any more progress on the book. I'm super excited about where I am. So I will see you next time.